I'm here today with the iconic David Ellefson to talk about Dieth, to Hell and Back, the debut record out June 2nd on Napalm Records. First of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time to coming on the channel to talk about the record. How are you doing today?
Great, man. Thanks for having me here.
So let me start off by asking you, what was the spark, or who was the spark that gave birth to the band?
Well, Guilherme had started writing some material, I guess probably late 2021, something like that. I was introduced to him by email through a mutual friend in January 2021, 2022. And he and Mihal had began, putting some material together. So they sent me over the song that would become In the Hall of the Hanging Serpents. I played bass on it. And like a lot of things, I say yes, sure, why not? And then you kind of let the chips fall where they may. And after Guilherme mixed it, he contacted all of us, very excited, and said, "Man, this sounds amazing. We should do more." So of course, my attitude is, yeah, sure, why not? Send me some more songs, right? So, because that's, I guess, like any friendship or anything, that's kind of how things start. You hang out once, if you like each other, you hang out again. And I think music is no different, if you've got a vibe between you. And clearly, we had a cool sound. And so I was in Europe a couple months later in April 2022. And while I was there, I hit Guilherme. I said, "Listen, man, we'd mentioned maybe making a video for this song. I'm here. I'll fly over to you in Poland and let's do it." I mean, within a minute, he was calling everybody, putting it together, driving amplifiers, and calling the video director and renting the club, and you know what I mean. And that's my kind of brother, because that's what I do. That's where I started. That's where it always ends up. Is that no one is above getting in the trenches. Even when your band is huge, you're still in the trenches, doing stuff. And you'd like to I know there was kind of a period for me, maybe in the 90s or something, you kind of go, all right, well, when do I not have to do that anymore? And the truth of it is, I like getting my hands dirty in the muck. You know what I mean? It's like that's the nitty gritty. That's where it all starts. I told a manager friend of mine one time, we went out to see a band and they were loading out, putting their gear into the van. And I said, "Hey man, let's help. No one's above lifting gear. Like everyone needs to load the van. You know what I
Unless you're
mean?"
the lead singer, then
Well, unless you're the lead singer. Yeah, exactly. And it's so I guess that's my mentality. No one's above humping gear. You know what I mean? That's how Motorhead put it on the back of Live at Hammersmith. I mean, so it's like let's do it. So, just a long story short, I mean that's it. That's where it started. It was an email, it was a recording, it was a video. We popped it up on my social media last summer, and right away, obviously, the reaction was huge to it, and that's how you know if you got something. It's kind of like, all right, again, let's go to the next phase. Let's drive another mile down the road and see where that takes us. So Napalm came to the table with an offer, and they were excited about it. And it was a nice, kind of a nice reset for the three of us, because we'd all been in our other bands, and those journeys had come to an end with those. So it was fun for us to not be in a hurry and just kind of let things play out and let this thing develop like it did. It's very organic.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. In terms of the sound, did you guys sit down and think about, okay, how do we want the band to sound? Or was the process of making the music that kind of determined the sound of the band?
The latter. Yeah. The process always determined, and even making the record, because we ended up making a record that's got a lot of variety on it. I know everyone kind of leads with this death and thrash metal thing, because that's our past, right?
It's not the only
Yeah,
thing.
it's not the only thing there. Yeah, that's our past, that's our history, and I feel really, really proud that we were able to take the strengths of our history and throw them all into a pot, and add some new ingredients to it and come out with something, just as tasty or better than what we had done in the past, and that doesn't happen very often, and I never like to call these things super groups, because they're not. We don't start with, well, let's throw a pile of famous guys in a room and see what they come up with. That's always the wrong way to do it. The calls I get, and probably Guilherme and Mihal too, we grew up in a community that our bands all got popular. All of my friends are fairly well-known musicians, because we all worked hard at it. And, I'll reference, say, Metal Allegiance, for example. That was just another community of friends doing something together. And everybody we called, they're well-known players, and they're our buddies. They're people we hang out with, great musicians, and also well-known. So, I think when we reach to each other to put things together, our phones are full of numbers of people that we would gravitate toward, because we know them and we trust them, and I think that's what's kind of interesting about Dieth, is these guys, I did not know them, so this was the introduction where I kind of got pulled into their world, which I've done that before. Temple of Brutality, Killing Machine, there's a few things that I've been asked to join up with, that I've the Caballeras were kind enough to ask me to come over and work with Soulfly and stuff like that. So I've done it before, but this one was cool because it was really and geographically it's a long ways away too. It's halfway around the world for me, but I figure, look, I get a geography and a cultural lesson out of this one too, which I enjoy.
I have to talk to you about the design of the record, because even before I got into the sound, when I went through the record the first time around, I was really impressed in terms of how you guys built this album, which I feel is built around, as far as the design is concerned, is built around 3 pillars: To Hell and Back, Severance, and then the ballad Walk With Me Forever. To me, these 3 songs are critical in the overall feel and overall design of the record, that I felt you guys were trying to create some control in the overall chaos that exists in the sound and the diversity of the sound. Do you see those 3 tracks as the pillars of the design, or am I seeing things where they don't exist?
You know what? I'll give you this. You are the very first person to ever say that. So thank you for your unique perspective on it. And I will agree with you, because you kind of lead with the singles, right? So obviously, to me, we have 3 singles out. It's the Hall of the Hanging Serpents, which we included on the record because it's the downbeat of where this thing started. Although it was not part of the Napalm Records kind of full length marketing plan, if you will, but we included it on the record because it's the origin story of where Dieth began. So then we go to Hell and Back, which really is the downbeat of the record. It's like, okay, this band is signed, it's a real thing, this is now it's a cohesive thought. And To Hell and Back really just became the obvious title. That song summarizes, the journey the 3 of us individually have had. Collectively, we've joined on the and back part, the To Hell part we did individually, the and back part we've done, collectively together, which is the joy of it, But so yeah, To Hell and Back, and then Don't Get Back, Get Even. I think, certainly, there's a lot you could read into that, for sure, because of, just past histories of things. But, that was more of a call to action to rise up and level up and be better than you were before. That was really kind of how we looked at that. But to your point, the next single that's coming out is Walk With Me Forever. So, To Hell and Back, again, the general overall summary of the record. And I think to start with that and to end with Severance, To Hell and Back starts with this, just got back, like we always say, when you go to hell and back, doesn't mean you went to hell and went to heaven. It just means you went to hell and came back, right? So now you're sort of a reset, right? And then so you go through this journey of the record, and at the end, Severance is being able to cut ties with your past, cut ties with the things that used to hold you in bondage, cut ties with maybe even people that set out to harm you, and had ulterior motives and agendas, so it's just being able to really kind of sever that, and it's funny how severance has this joyful sound to it, that it's a good thing. It's not a mean, vindictive thing like that. It's a sort of a, musically you would call it a reprise, because it sort of echoes the very first thing you heard on the record, which is that intro to Hell and Back. But I think thematically, with the thought of the record, it closes the chapter. It closes the book on that story, and it is that. I look at the album like it's a book, right? It's like when I read a fictional novel, or you read someone's memoir or something. It's a snapshot of that period of time, and so I think Severance is a great way to close it. And then as we now move into the future records, they'll have their own story to tell.
When it comes to the bass sound, I really like the bass sound on this album. I thought it popped at the right times. It had an impact when it needed to have an impact. Were you more hands-on when it came to the mixing of the bass and how much you wanted the bass to come through in the overall sound experience?
Yeah, no, for sure. Sometimes I get called in to be, David Ellefson, right? So you plug in and you want to be that tone, that style, that sound, that guy, right? This one required that for sure, because, my name is on the door, so to speak, with, being one of the three, pillars and founders of the group here. But it also provided me an opportunity to play differently, approach the songs and the bass differently. And we recorded it in several different sessions too. Some of it I did here, like probably half the record I did here in Phoenix at a studio that I work at, called the Platinum Underground. And we've got really dialed, we know how to plug me in and make it really work, right? Some of it we recorded over at Kola Keller Studios in Germany, probably the second half of the record. We did those tracks over there. I think in this day and age with recording, as long as your bass is lucky, because we always take a direct signal out. We just always live and recording. We've done that. That's become more popular in recent years with guitars as well. So you have this really clean signal that you can reamp, and, sort of in post-production and mixing, you can sort of develop the sounds to get them as big as you want. And it's important with a band like this, where the tuning's low. Low tunings get harder to decipher from the human ear. Production wise, speakers and amplifiers, they start to get a little wonky, when you're down in these tunings. One of the things that I did, just from a performance point of view, is I actually took my 5-string bass, and instead of tuning the bass down to a C, I tuned it up from a B to a C. So I actually tuned up rather than tuning down. Which really, I think, sonically makes the bass sing a lot better. It makes the strings twangier and pop a little bit better. But then, just as far as the performance, for me as the performer on the record, I think, there was times when it was required to sort of jump in and play along, and that's something I've done my whole career on some of the riffing. And then some of it is just, holding things down, and really locking in. And that was a fun experience, because playing with Mihal as a drummer, in my opinion, you're only as good as your drummer. And he's a fantastic player. He really understands this kind of music. He's super tight in his performances. And he's a very musical drummer, and I think that's the thing, is to take this kind of music that's this brutal, this heavy, this dark, if you will, and to be able to be musical with it is really, that was a fun challenge to do that, to kind of, to make it grow when you have to go low, was a fun challenge on the album.
Having worked on so many records, working on this album, were you still faced with challenges, with things that you hadn't seen before that perhaps motivate you to continue to create music and push forward?
Sure. I mean, look, I came from a group for many, many years where we could pretty much finish each other's sentences because that's what happens when you're in any, friendship, musical relationship or otherwise, you get to know each other, right? So, coming into this one, Guilherme, again, not knowing him, not being as familiar with his guitar playing style, I had to learn how he speaks through the guitar. And he's younger than me, so he's certainly got other influences that I have not had. So I had to learn where looking at where his note choices are and his chord voicings and things. So that was probably the first thing I had to pay attention to was, okay, what is he playing here, and is he moving things in fret movements and things that I was not familiar with, to be honest with you. So that has been an ongoing challenge for me, and I say challenge just because it's not second nature for me. It's and that's just kind of learning to have this new musical conversation with each other is really what that is. So I think that was the first thing. Then probably the next thing was, also becoming a singer in the band, which was not obvious at all when we started working together. It happened, I think, when I sent over the song Heavy as the Crown. Both Guilherme and Michal, they said, "Oh man, you're definitely going to be singing this song. Like, your voice is perfect." Because I sent over the music, the melody, and I'd sent the lyrics over separately, and Guilherme kind of pieced both of them together. So learning how Guilherme composes, and I say composing because composing isn't just necessarily writing the part. It's sort of, I look at composing as kind of taking all of the elements and sort of putting it together so it makes a composition, right? And arranging is part of that. I know there's this argument that arranging is not songwriting. It's like, well, your pile of riffs on the floor ain't a song, so someone putting that together, that's part of songwriting. And I'll argue that to the death. And so Guilherme does a great job with that. I think, I defer to him. I trust him. I trust his ear. I trust his instincts. So I defer to him. Even just yesterday, I sent over some new things that I just came up with here at the house, because we have a folder, like an album 2 folder, right, that has a lot of stuff in it, right? Lyrics. Yeah, when I travel and I roam the earth, man, that's when I probably get my most creativity, and there'll be moments even just sitting here at the house where it's empty, it's quiet, and I'll pick up my guitar and things fall out, and so it's as we're sending things, I think now I've got a better kind of idea of how my parts fit into the overall Dieth sound, because it's important you establish a sound and that it's maintained. As much diversity as we have on the record, it all sounds like Dieth. It's not, there's no real random thing that's like so out of character. So it's important that we keep that. And I kind of look at Guilherme as a bit of the gatekeeper on that. I defer to him as the instinct there.
I find it really interesting that you say that, because I feel like a lot of bands don't perhaps discover their sound or their fingerprint, if you will, until maybe the second, third album. Normally, third album is when you start to see the shape of what the band's future is going to be. Do you see the same for you guys, or the sound that we got on this record is already very close of what that fingerprint is going to be?
I think we nailed it pretty good on this first album. And, that's why, look, we had a choice. We either just go straight ahead and be a freight train the whole time in 10 songs that are all kind of the same, or we let loose a bit and we do Severance, Walk With Me Forever, Free Us All, Heavy as the Crown. We do these things that widen the scope and let an opportunity for kind of greater advantage of storytelling. You know, when I came into it, I didn't know, look, am I just going to play bass to Guilherme's song or two and we'll see where it goes? Or, you know, as it's turned, we've become very much an integrated three-piece band. You know, kind of I look at it like Rush or something, you know, where there's three very distinctive roles, three distinctive personalities, and you can hear every one of those inside the band. And maybe that's the difference of working with a three-piece too versus a four-piece, which is pretty new for me. You know, my very first band was a three-piece. For one brief moment, Megadeth was a three-piece. Um, After Kerry King was in the band, when Gar Samuelson joined, and that was before Chris Poland joined. This was 1984. We did a few shows together as a three-piece, and that never felt complete like that. I don't, you know, but this one feels complete as a three-piece, you know, and we're going to hire a touring guitar player because the orchestration of the parts requires, you know, another musician there to perform it. But I'm saying as a creative force in how we compose and how we record our records, especially, you know, we're very much a three-piece, and I can confirm that because we did this over several sessions. You know, it's not like we just went in once for a month and cut the whole record and this is what we get. And I think that's kind of the fun of that. You know, I never liked this thing where you go in and you record a record all at one time. I think it's so compressed. You don't give enough time for certain ideas to embellish and unfold, you know. Sometimes by just booking a calendar of, hey, it starts here and it ends here, it's like, whoa, you know, you're locked into that and it has to get done. I think sometimes you compromise some of the greater creativity. So with this record, it was cool that we did it in several sessions over kind of three different periods. And it allowed you know, I think every time we came back together, we brought a different batch of songs with us, and that's maybe why the record got as wide and creative as it got. Is that we didn't try to just all bang it all out in one session.
And you mentioned the word earlier on, the word supergroup. And normally when you have supergroups, very rarely you can see, I mean, not to say that you don't have a follow-up record, not to say that there's not another album down the road, but sometimes it's very focused just on the project at hand and releasing that project at hand. From what I'm getting from you, and you mentioned adding a second guitarist for touring, are you guys planning on hitting the road once the album is out, doing some festivals this summer? What's the schedule looking like?
Yeah, we've got three shows that warm us up in Poland, second week of June, and then we head right into the Grass Pop Festival. And then we have a show in the Czech Republic, the Vagos Festival in Portugal, Motoculture Festival in France. And then now it looks like there might be some other dates coming in as well. So it's kind of, you know, a summer in Europe, if you will, to, you know, kickstart this thing and, you know, sort of prop it up, give it its first presentation and give it its first look.
Will we see a fall or perhaps a winter in North America?
I hope so. You know, all these things, they go, you know, you go from being an unknown, you know, 2 months ago, like no one knew who we were. I mean, some people did because we launched it last year, but, you know, for the most part, it's, let's face it, people forget quickly, you know, especially with social media, man, there's so much that comes at us. And so that's why, you know, a pretty heavy concentrated effort right now in the 3 months leading up to the release and the 3 months after the release to really hit the ground running. And then after that, you know, then once people know what it is, who it is, what it sounds like, you know, that's when the other opportunities start to develop. So, you know, just like anything else, you know, any business, you know, you stand on the street corner with a sign and say, hey, donuts this way, you know, and you try to get everybody over to the shop to, you know, to have a taste. So it's no different with a rock band.
I have one last question for you. It perhaps not a fair question or not an easy question. I asked this to Dave Lombardo last time I had him on the channel. Considering how many albums you've worked on, how many great records you have your fingerprint on, is there one for you that kind of stands out in the crowd? It was a hard question for him to answer. It took a long time. I don't know if it's a fair question to ask.
Well, I don't think there's one, you know, it kind of falls in the category of, hey, what's your favorite food or what's your favorite color or what's your favorite country to play? You know, I don't really have one, you know, to me, it's like, I don't live in black and whites, right? Because between black and white is where all the color is, right? To me, it's not gray, it's colorful. And so in between, and like you said, those were all those records are, the beginning and where I'm at now, and I mean, certainly this record I love. When we put out the Metal Allegiance records, I loved them because, again, I was making records with my friends. They're fun. Sometimes it's the music. Sometimes it's just the feeling I walk away from it. Go, man, that was a fun experience, man. That was really. Sometimes the memory lives on more than the record, because sometimes I make records and I'll be honest, I barely listen to them again. And I hate to call it record and forget, but sometimes it's what we do. It's like we record them, you move on. Even when you're learning a record for touring, you go back and go, oh my God, it was 6 months ago that we recorded this record. Okay, what did I play here? And you kind of have to relearn you. And that's just how it is, in the professional world. Or maybe you pull a song in from an earlier album into the show, and like with Kings of Thrash, we're doing that, right? And I'm going back and as I play along to Killing Is My Business to relearn those songs, which come back super easy. I mean, I remember them like it was yesterday. I think about some fun times we had at that era of the band in the studio. I could picture being up at Indigo Ranch in Malibu, me, David, Gar in the room recording, Karen Fay at the engineering the record. I mean, I think of more. I often think of more about the people and the experience almost more than I do the music, because behind the music is a whole other story. And I'm reading Bruce Dickinson's book right now, and he was talking about when they were at Nassau Compass Point Studios recording Peace of Mind, I think it was, and maybe Power Slave too, right? And he's telling these stories that again, he would know because he was there. About the fish and the water out by the place where they're staying, and very little about the studio experience. He's talking, and I get it. I totally get it. It's like that's how if people ask me, tell me about recording this album, I'd probably tell you about what food we ate if the sun was out, who was engineering, what I remember those experiences almost more than the music. The music is for you guys because that's your experience with it, and sometimes the personal, little bubble we live in, that's sort of my takeaway.
That's a great way of answering that question. I honestly really love that. It's a great insight. I just want to say thank you once again for taking the time. I know you guys have a busy schedule. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the channel. If my 12-year-old self found out that this moment was going to happen today, I think I would have just signed up myself for the loony bin, because there's no way this would ever happen. Growing up,
nice. It's all about making our inner 12-year-old happy, dude. I know, believe me. That's when I was playing bass, learning Kiss songs. I know we all have that moment as rockers.
When you get to your middle age, I mean, you start to look more backwards and reminiscing of the past instead of looking forwards, because you see like a decline ahead. Like you're over the hill and then you start going down the hill. So it's a lot more fun to look at what happened behind you and appreciate all those moments. So you've been a huge part of my life, listening to your music since I was a kid. So thank you very much for taking the time today.
Cool. Thank you, Pedro. Rock on, brother.
Take care, man. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.